With the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 already halfway through their current cycles, a lot has happened, from exciting stuff like new controller and console releases, exclusive titles, accessories, software updates, to the not so exciting stuff like consoles melting, discs getting stuck in disk drives, all of which sum up to the question we all ask: which one should you buy? After using both consoles extensively over the past 3 years, I've had the best of both worlds. So in this video, we take a deep dive into both ecosystems to make you aware of things you've never known about the Series X and PS5 over the past 3 years, what the future holds for both ecosystems, in a bid to answer that mind twister: which console should you buy? Buckle up and let's go for the ride. Kicking off with performance, which is by far one of the biggest points of contention for the fanboys in both camps. Now, on paper, the Series X is slightly powerful compared to the PS5, coming in with 12 teraflops compared to the 10.3 we get with the PS5, but in reality, over the last 2 years of using them, I haven't picked up any significant differences when it comes to performance, as they both offer variable refresh rate, otherwise known as VRR, HDR, 4K at 120 FPS, although my TV's lack of HDMI 2.1 means I can only get 60 FPS, which still works out well for me. When it comes to loading times, although not a significant metric, the Xbox put it up a lot faster when starting the console, but when it came to games, I've noticed this varies depending on the game. In some games, the PS5 loaded a lot faster than the Xbox, and in other games, the Xbox loaded faster. Even though they have a millisecond or two over the other from case to case, when it comes to performance, they both run games smoothly and the graphics are super high quality, which adds an amazing touch of realism to whichever game you're playing. From a personal standpoint, the time I've spent with both consoles has made me realize the loading times of games is somewhat inclined to which ecosystem the game developers are familiar with, whether it's the Series X or PS5, which is the perfect segue to how each console is optimized for performance. On the Xbox, you can do that by tweaking the refresh rate and resolution, whereas on the PS5 you can set it to performance mode for the best gaming and console experience. Talking of the best gaming and console experiences, that hasn't always been the case, as both ecosystems have had their fair share of issues since launch, and starting with the Series X, early on some users complained about their game discs getting stuck in the disk drive, and by far the most concerning was when the disc got stuck halfway through the disk drive, accompanied by loud clicking sounds and noises. Having never experienced this problem on my Series X, inside the weeds of Reddit would be the perfect place to find some possible answers, and sure enough, there were plenty of causes, with the most notable being dust and accidental drop of items in the disk drive. As always, the solutions are also in the thread, some of which I wouldn't recommend, like brute forcing the disk into the disk drive, which surprisingly enough worked in a particular instance, as pointed out in this Reddit thread. As for the dust, a simple clean would work the magic. Another problem was the discs not playing, and in most cases this stemmed from the accumulation of dust, and good thing, most often than not, like mentioned earlier, a simple clean would do the magic. Jumping across the fence to the PlayStation ecosystem, once again I've been lucky enough not to experience any issues in the 3 years I've had it, but circling back to a few months after release and a select few cases after the release of Final Fantasy 16 and Diablo 4, a number of people complained about the liquid metal problem, which resulted in consoles melting, and once again from my Reddit escapades I picked up a myriad of reasons that caused this, from placing your consoles vertically, loading up your I/O ports, design flaws, GPU intensive games like the ones I just mentioned, which cause your console to overheat, and accumulation of dust inside the console, just to name but a few. Just like the Series X, lots of solutions were laid out, from placing your consoles horizontally, reducing the number of accessories plugged into your console, to dusting your consoles, and like mentioned a little earlier, setting your consoles to performance mode. Now, from a personal standpoint, I haven't had any issues placing my console vertically, but the horizontal placement appears to have worked for some people. As for loading up the I/O, in my reckoning, this goes hand in hand with the GPU intensive games and the accumulation of dust inside the consoles, more so on the power supply vent. To break down how this trio goes hand in hand, when your ports are loaded to the brim, they obviously need to draw more power to support the accessories plugged in, and the same power is also required when running GPU intensive games. So when the accessories and the GPU are both fighting for power, then you throw in the power supply vent covered in dust to the mix, overheating is bound to happen, and in some instances your console even shuts down. To put that into context, if you Google Spider-Man 2 shuts down PS5, you'd be surprised how many people had this issue. In saying that, majority of the issues on both ecosystems have now been solved, but just like in any environment, there will always be those outliers, and these solutions can help solve the problem whenever it occurs. Having talked about performance and the possible hindrances to the consoles in both ecosystems performing at their best and the solutions to those hindrances, we might as well take a look at some of the games and how well each ecosystem is optimized for the perfect gaming experience. Now, for the most part, the Series X and PS5 have the same games, whether it's FIFA, NBA 2K, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed. You can pretty much play them on both consoles, but when it comes to exclusives like Forza Horizon 5 on the Series X or Spider-Man Miles Morales on the PS5, you can only play them on one of the two platforms, and although Nintendo and PC also jump into the mix, that's a video for another day. Personally, Forza Horizon 5 has been amazing to play on the Series X, and if you'd ask me, the best racing game by a mile since the days of Need for Speed from back in the day. Some of the Xbox exclusives I've enjoyed include Starfield, Indiana Jones, Planet of Lana, among many others. As for the PS5 exclusives, Spider-Man Miles Morales was one of my favorites, alongside Ratchet & Clank, Horizon Forbidden West, Cyberpunk, The Last of Us Part 1, just to name but a few. Now, while both platforms have exclusive, the PS5 has a lot more exclusive in its games library compared to the Series X, and if you're a gamer like me, by now, you know the games library is one of the areas that opens up a huge can of worms between fans on either platforms. Speaking of which, the games library would be the perfect segue to Game Pass on the Series X and PlayStation Plus on the PS5. When it comes to Game Pass and PlayStation Plus, like mentioned earlier, the biggest point of contention is usually the exclusive titles, and even though the PS5 has this going for it, I like Game Pass on the Series X and for a few good reasons. One is it's a lot cheaper, plus you can play the games on the cloud, and the fact that Sony also increased the price on the 3 subscription tiers makes it even a better choice in my reckoning. Now, don't get me wrong, playing exclusive AAA titles is great, but I prefer having a wide array of options to play in addition to the AAA titles at a fair price. Speaking of which, with Game Pass, you get access to some of the cross-platform games right when they release at no extra cost, compared to getting them at full price on the PlayStation Plus, and that's not all. With the recent acquisition of Activision Blizzard, it wouldn't be a surprise seeing acquisition games like Overwatch 2, Battlefield, Call of Duty on launch day inside Game Pass, which I'm sure a lot of people would be excited about. Game Pass also doesn't do trials and charge you like PlayStation Plus does, which if you'd ask me, paying to play trials is not ideal at all. I'd rather the game is there or not. Another reason why I like Game Pass is the fact that Xbox pushed cross-platform play way earlier, which continues with the recent announcement from Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond and Matt Booty on the Xbox podcast that 4 exclusive titles will be opening up to other platforms, and after digging through Reddit, the rumored titles are said to be Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, Grounded and Pentiment. In my reckoning, Xbox in tandem with Game Pass are doing the best for the gaming community compared to PlayStation Plus, which keeps most of their exclusives as segmented as possible, and that gives most gamers who love those titles no choice but to jump into the Sony ecosystem. Speaking of jumping into the Sony ecosystem, you might as well jump into it quite literally. Now, even though I find Game Pass to be the better bang for your buck, PlayStation Plus also has a few things going for it, like a better library of exclusive titles, the Sony Pictures Core in the premium subscription, which gives you access to a vast array of movies at no extra cost, and just like in the Xbox, it also offers backward compatibility but not fully to allow you play PlayStation 1, 2 and 3 games, which when compared to the Series X that still plays game discs from back in the day, the Series X blows it off the park in that area. Now, this can leave a lot of the hardcore gamers in a bit of a hard spot deciding what ecosystem to jump into, especially if some of their favorite titles are across the other platform. My solution to this would be, if you have the means, then get both consoles, but if that's not the case and you love AAA titles, I'd recommend the PlayStation 5 over the Series X. For those on the other hand, if you'd prefer access to a vast library of games and not as many AAA titles at an affordable price, then the Series X will be ideal for you, not to mention developer mode, which enables you play games from as far as the Wii era after you install an emulator. Moving along, having just talked about the games and the games library, we might as well take a look at how both ecosystems have translated their games library to remote play. Now, even though both platforms offer remote play, Xbox Cloud Gaming has some daylight on the PlayStation Remote Play, as you can play from any device, whether it's your laptop, phone, a handheld like the ROG Ally, regardless of whether your console is on or not. PlayStation Remote Play, on the other hand, can only happen when your console is on or on rest mode, which is a bit of a bummer given the potential the PlayStation Portal holds. Hopefully Sony pulls the pin on the need to have your console on or in rest mode, as this would cause some serious ripples in the handheld gaming market. Talking of handhelds, the controllers are exactly that, just without the screens, and this is another area that has seen lots of movement since the launch of the consoles a little over 3 years ago. Getting into it, Xbox maintained the same design language from the previous gen, and like mentioned in my dedicated 3-year review, the one thing I don't like about it is the AA batteries, and even though you can get rechargeable ones, in this day and age an inbuilt rechargeable battery is the standard, just like they did in the Series 2 Elite Pro controller. The PS5 controller, on the other hand, got a design refresh from the PS4 controller, and it came with lots of features like the adaptive triggers which react and respond to whatever you're doing in the game, the haptic feedback to totally immerse you in the game, for instance the vibration you feel when nailing a 3-pointer in NBA 2K, then the inbuilt mic that allows you to chat with mates when playing online, just to name but a few. It's not all roses and sunshine though. All those features come at a cost in the form of a measly 6 to 8 hours of battery life, and comparing it to the 40 hours you get on the AA batteries on the Xbox controller, most gamers would rather have that any day. Moving along, after launch I had a feeling Xbox would release a Pro controller, given that we saw the Elite Controller 1 back in 2015, but on Sony's front I didn't expect much to happen other than a few different colorways going by the history of the previous gen controller. But around the 3-year mark we saw their first Pro controller in the form of the DualSense Edge, which in my opinion was pressure from Xbox after they'd released the Elite Series 2 a few months earlier. Diving deeper into the Pro controllers, nothing really separates one from the other, as they both come with adjustable trigger stops, rear paddles and swappable pads. In saying that, they both got an edge or two over the other, and in the case of the DualSense Edge, its edge quite literally is the ability to swap the thumbsticks in case you suffer stick drift, and in the case of the Elite Series 2 controller, it's the 40 hours of battery life you get compared to the 5 to 8 hours on the DualSense Edge. Design wise, they're both unique in themselves and have great designs, but for some reason I like the Elite Series 2 more. Speaking of the controller design, that would be the perfect segue to the console design, which is one of the areas that most of the PlayStation lovers copped lots of slack because of how big the original PS5 is, but with the release of the PS5 Slim, more people have become softer on the PS5 console design. Getting into the meat and potatoes of the PS5 console design, for the first time Sony moved away from the boxy design language we saw from the days of the PS1, 2, 3 and 4, and I find it quite futuristic with the glow along the veins completing that alien look. In terms of height, it's slightly taller than the Series X, and if you've got a tiny space, you'll have trouble fitting it in there. The Series X on the other hand is a lot chunkier but would fit in most spaces, and the fact that it can easily pass as a sub, it easily integrates with the rest of the tech in your setup. When it comes to customization, by default the PS5 comes with the wide place, but after a little over 3 years, we've got lots of customization options from Sony, third-party suppliers like Dbrand and a few less known brands on Amazon. As for the Series X, it doesn't come with removable panels, but you can buy skins like the Starfield, Mineral Camo, and unlike the removable PlayStation plates, they just wrap around your console and velcro at the back to give it a new look. Speaking of new looks, Sony have already given their PS5 a mid-cycle refresh, and renders of the PS5 Pro are already starting to fly around in the tech grapevine. As for the Series X, design refresh rumors of a cylindrical Series X are so rife, and if there are anything to go by, it's set to release later on this year. When it comes to storage, out of the box the Series X has a lot more storage, coming out with 1TB, of which 800 gigs are usable. In the case of the PlayStation 5, you'd be getting around 825 gigs, of which 667 gigs are usable, and if you'd ask me, they both fill up quite fast, and that's where the expansion card comes in for the Xbox, and an M.2 NVMe SSD stick for the PlayStation 5, and the best part is it doesn't end at that. You can also use an SSD to transfer games back and forth on either console, and in the case of the Series X, I'd recommend this method as it's more cost effective. The put that into context, the 1TB Xbox expansion card here in Australia would cost you 427 Australian dollars, whereas a 1TB Samsung SSD would cost you 150 Australian dollars. For the PlayStation 5, an M.2 NVMe SSD stick is the better option, as a 1TB M.2 stick from a reputable brand would cost you around 100 Australian dollars. With both consoles up and firing, the user experience is what comes next. Personally, I find them quite snappy and responsive when navigating the home screen, but in terms of layout, I like the PS5 more, and even though majority of what we saw on the PS4 made it to the 5, the interface is more intuitive with amazing wallpapers and color changes that make the user experience feel so interactive. The Series X on the other hand carries on with the same user interface since the Xbox One with very minimal changes, although I like the option to customize your color scheme. It's not all dark and gloom though. The quick resume feature on the Xbox is an amazing feature that puts you back in the thick of the action like you never left, and compared to the PS5, I feel as though I go through so many buttons just to get back into the game. As for the overall layout of the menus, even though there's a bunch of items that get displayed, it doesn't take that long to get the hang of both menus even for a complete novice. When it comes to updates, after 3 years we've seen a bunch of updates that create a stark difference from launch day. Case in point, at launch, the Xbox home screen wasn't 4K and looked completely different to what it is now. The PS5 also hasn't been left behind on the update front. At launch, the console didn't come with variable refresh rate and 1440p support. All of that came later on through updates. As for the apps, they offer more or less the same functions, be it seeing updates, notifications, game progress, the list goes on and on. When it comes to usability, they're both quite user friendly and I haven't had any qualms with them since launch. As for the accessories, after 3 years, both the Xbox and PlayStation 5 have had a myriad of accessories, be it charging stations, storage drives, controllers, custom plates and skins, headphones, the list goes on and on. Now, if you'd ask me, for the most part, I think they offer the same experience, and regardless of which ecosystem you fall into, you won't feel as though you're missing out on anything. The one thing I'd love to see from Xbox is a handheld gaming device, which would be quite fun to compare to what we already have in the market. With the meat on the bones of each ecosystem completely stripped out, we finally get to that mind twister: which console should you buy? Now, this is going to depend on a list of things, and the first thing you'll have to do is determine the kind of games you'll want to play, as this will help solve the PlayStation Plus vs Game Pass debate further down the line. And to make it even easier for you, if you like playing exclusive AAA titles, then the PlayStation 5 has more of them in their library. But if that's not the case, the Series X would be ideal for you, as it still has exclusive AAA titles, but not as many as the PlayStation 5, and its backward compatibility stretches out to the days of the original Xbox, not to mention developer mode, which enables you play games from as far as the Wii era after you install an emulator. Another thing to consider is the platform most of your gamer friends use, and even though you could still play in different platforms, doing so in the same ecosystem makes things a lot easier. Talking of making things easier, Sony's recent announcement that the PlayStation 5 is entering its latter stages and no more exclusive titles coming out this year makes the answering process of this question a lot easier. In conclusion, both consoles work amazingly well, but if you'd ask me, I'd much rather you wait for the rumored cylindrical console for those who like the Series X and the PS5 Pro for those who prefer the PlayStation. Well, there you have it, peeps. I hope you enjoyed and found this video helpful, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and click the notification bell to get notified whenever I post a new video. Here's another video that you definitely don't want to miss. Until then, people of the internet, I'm signing out. See you on the next one.